Well, welcome back to Tuts Plus. My name's Simon Plant, and today we're going to be working on this image. I'm going to show you how we change the uniform from red to purple using the replace color command, and also added some extra level of realism. So welcome back. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this image before we start on the retouching. This image was finished about a week ago. I was looking to add some new work to my portfolio, and also I was pitching for some work with a client, and that was the other reason for wanting to create this kind of air hostess airport type image. So the way I went about this one was I found the background elements, i.e. the sky, the airplane and the mountains in the background, created the tarmac as several different images, and also made some of it in Photoshop, and worked out all the lighting. Obviously the lighting was much dictated by the sky image that I picked out, and so we had the sun obviously coming up in this angle. So that meant I knew when it came to photograph the model, I knew exactly where the lighting needed to be to kind of blend in with the background and how the shadows needed to fall. Now, we booked the model and she came to the studio, but we had a brilliant, beautiful, bright sunny day, and I always believe if you want to replicate daylight, then use daylight if you can. Now it's not always possible, maybe because of the weather. So rather than use studio, we dumped that idea and we went outside, and we used what was available there. The sun was a little bit slightly not quite the same angle, but it was close enough that I could manipulate it and make it work for us. The reason I'm telling you all this is because obviously I want to show you the actual model shot, and you would have probably been wondering why as he shot it outside of a building like that. Well, the reason was purely because the lighting was at a good angle there. We had this concrete that she could walk on, because some of the rest of the location by the studio is a lot of it is chippings, and you can't really walk on that with high heels, not that I know, but also she had the suitcase here, so that's the reason we used this background. So that gives you a little bit of information of how and why of the image. So this is what we were faced with. Well, this is the original. This is what we finished with in terms of the colour. This is what I started with. The uniforms I normally get from a theatrical place because they're better quality than going for fancy dress uniforms. But I couldn't get what I wanted. So we actually found a fancy dress shop with some good quality stuff. But couldn't get the colour I wanted, obviously. I wanted a purple. So this is why we decided that we go with this. We're on a bit of a time restraint, and we change the colour in Photoshop. Right, we're now in Photoshop Creative Cloud, and we're going to walk you through this colour replacement tool that's in Photoshop, and we'll look at the pros and cons of using that, and give you some tips. So we're going to press Command or Control J to duplicate our background layer. We're going to go to Edit, to Image, Adjustments, and then down here to Replace Color. And we get this this rather large dialog box. Well, the box is quite large. The actual preview is very small, which I find a bit frustrating. I thought Photoshop would have modified these preview boxes by now. They're a bit fiddly, but we'll go with it and do the best we can. So what we need to do is basically we're going to pick the colour here that we want to change to in a minute, but first of all we need to kind of tell Photoshop what colours we want to replace. So we do that. We've got these little eyedropper tools here. We've got the first one selected, and we're going to go into the image and click on the red of the uniform. And by doing that, you can see the preview change. We can select image or selection. We're going to leave it on selection. And remember that white reveals, black conceals. So any turning white is going to be our active selection where this effect, this colour change is going to take place. So what we can do then is add the, click on the plus sign of the eyedropper, and that will add to this selection. So we just click around anywhere else that we need to make sure that we've got selected, like on the bag here. And I think, in my opinion, it's better to over select and under select. We could then use the fuzziness to kind of refine the selection a little bit, get rid of some of that background like so. We can use the minus eyedropper then to click on the legs if you want to take the selection away from the legs, and again just use the fuzziness slider like so. and we will get bits that we perhaps don't want, like the hand here. But as I said, these previews are very small on here, which is frustrating. Okay, so we can then start to look at the color we want to change to. So we're not going to worry too much about the color at this stage. We're just going to pick something that is going to work well. So we're going to use the hue adjustment here to change the color. You can see that's now changing to like a purple or a blue. So let's go with somewhere between a blue and a purple there. That's quite nice. We can also alter the saturation, make it a little lighter, more saturated or desaturated. And I would use this with a little bit of caution. I'm going to go too far. And I'm just going to leave it at maybe -5, something like that. And the lightness the same. You can use it a little bit, but again, I'd be very wary of using the lightness too much. So we're just going to leave that at 0. And then that is it. We'll click on OK. And there you go. There's before, there's after. Okay, so I'm actually joking. It has done a very, very good job on the face of it. And if you're just looking to put something on the web and nothing too high resolution, or you're not too worried, then you might be happy with that. But on closer inspection here, this is quite a high resolution file. But you can see the edges don't quite come up to scratch there. They've got tinge to them. We've got a bit of that blue on the inside of her hand there, which we don't want, and also up around her ears. She's now got blue ears, which not very desirable, and also blue lips, which again is not too good. Now, this is the problem with using this command as we've done it. It's going to make the refining this very, very difficult. It's basically a destructive way of working, because we've got no way really of going back from here. It's just on a layer. If we convert this to a smart object and go to image again, let's wait for that to do that business, you will find that the replace color is grayed out, so it doesn't really support smart objects. So for me, if you watch a lot of my videos, you'll know that I like to work non-destructively, which I think a lot of people do. I also like flexibility in the way I work. So if I need to go back and change stuff, which I often do, as you work through an image, sometimes the things you've done maybe 20 minutes ago, you need to go back and refine a little bit. So it's a smarter way of working. And so this way for me is not a good way of working. But I'm going to show you a couple of other ways of doing this, which I think is a bit more flexible. The first way is going to be using the same function again on the replace color. And then I'm going to show you a completely different way of doing a similar thing, which is very, very editable. Okay, before we move on, I'm just going to touch on something very quickly. Under the brushes here, there is an option for the color replacement tool to use it as a brush. Let me just zoom in a little bit, like so. And what we can do is go down to your color picker. You can pick a color. I've picked out a green here, and click OK. And you can actually paint over the image with the brush directly, just to change the colour there, and it will try and constrain what you're painting within the lines there. I'm not sure how it does that, but it's quite clever. But it will go over. If you force it too much, it will go over. But if you've got a steady hand and you're changing maybe a small area, this might be an option to do that. But I find this a little bit, I can't see it working for me very well the way I like to work. But it's worth telling you about it, and it's showing you it's there. And again, it's quite destructive way of working, which really you want to try and avoid, in my opinion. But I just wanted to show you that before we move on. So moving on, let's show you this other technique for using the color replacement tool. I'm just going to delete this layer. I'm going to make another duplicate of the background, like there. And the difference is with this time is we're going to make a selection of the model, and we're going to use that to refine the mask and make sure that the color replacement gets in all the places that we want it to, and not in the places we don't want it to. So I've got a selection I've done here. I'm not going to take you through the selection creation process because there's just so many tutorials I've already done on that, and we need to move on quickly as possible. So I'm going to go to select, load selection. I'm going to load my selection of my model there, and then I'm going to click on create new layer mask, and we've now got the models isolated from the background. Now the thing you need to do is make sure that you refine your selection. Go to select, refine mask, and then make sure you check around the edges and make sure that you've got everything in the model's clothing that you need selected, and refine that mask edge. Next thing I'm going to do is press Command and Control J to duplicate that layer. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to rename this one color change. Make sure the thumbnail is selected, not the mask, the thumbnail on the layer, and go to image adjustment and then down to replace color. Once again, got to make sure that we select the reds in the uniform. Now with this, click on the plus eyedropper tool. Once again, you want to make sure you select as much of the reds as possible. Don't mind if you select too much, but it's better than selecting not enough. So even though we don't really want them to be red, we need to also select the highlights here as well, because if we don't select them, when we change the color, they're going to remain that kind of slightly red color cast. So better to select all of them. Select too much rather than too little is the thing to do. And then we can use a fuzziness slider once again just to refine that a little bit. Get the minus eyedropper, maybe take the legs away, but it's not that important this time because we've got that mask. And as I said, it's better to have too much than too little. I'm going to change the hue now back to my green, like so, and then click OK. So now we have our green uniform. And if it's not enough, you can go back in. But we've also got the mask here. So if you don't want green hands, all we need to do is to get a paintbrush tool with black as the foreground, and we just paint away the hands. Now you notice that the hands now disappearing, but because I've got this layer here, I can basically fill this. We'll delete that layer mask. And I'm going to go down to the layer mask, but I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key. And what that does will give us a layer mask filled with black, which is hiding everything. Then go to Select and load your selection of your model or whatever you're manipulating. And then I can just paint back in on the layer mask with white, and just paint back in the hand there. So that is one way of getting around this. It's still very fiddly, and bear in mind the only reason we're doing all this is because the preview is a bit tiny on the color replacement tool. So actually, getting those edges spot on can be a bit tricky. And more importantly, it's a destructible way of working. We can't go back in now if the client or somebody comes back and says, you know what, we want to change the color of the uniform. We decided to have a complete color change, and we're now going for a much lighter yellow color. Then you've got to start over again. Apart from reusing a mask, you've got to start again. So I'm going to show you next. I think is a much better way of working. Okay, so I've deleted those layers. I've duplicated our back layer, and obviously we've got. I'm just going to get rid of that black there. So basically, we've just got a copy of our background layer. Right, so now we need to go to that selection you've made again. There. To load that selection, we're then going to go to the adjustment layers and go to hue saturation. And that is load our selection on the layer here. So it's only going to affect our model, not the background. And then we could just simply go to the hue slider here and find that green I want. Somewhere around there for now, and that's it, it's done. And we can literally now go onto the mask, and anything that we don't want affected, like if we don't really want particularly green hair and green ear holes, we can just go onto the layer mask with a brush, painting with black, and just remove them like so, which is a much better way of working. Much better because it's non-destructible, and better still, if the client does come back and says he wants that yellow color instead, we can just literally change the hue of this and find the color they want, like so, and it's done, like so. So much better way of working, much better way. And we can obviously go in, and if the mask isn't quite right, we can just come down and we can refine that edges like so, and make sure the mask and the colour is covered on those edges. So much better way of working. It makes you wonder why you would ever want to use the colour replacement tool. I'm sure there is benefits to it, maybe that I'm not aware of, but for me, this way of working makes a lot more sense because this is completely editable. So once we clean, I'm going to carry on cleaning this mask up, and then we're going to come back and show you some finishing touches to this. And another little tip that I hadn't thought of until I started this video, which I also want to include, and we'll finish off with that in a second. Right, so I've come in and I've refined my mask, but you'll still see in certain areas you've still got a bit of like a red colour cast. Now what that is where the uniform basically just reflected the sunlight, reflected off the uniform onto the white, and it's just like a bit of a colour cast. Now, we don't really want that there, but there is a solution we can use. If you can refine your mask where you want, sometimes you just won't get everything. So here's another little thing you can do, is to make a empty layer above, and with the brush tool, you want to press down the Alt Option key to sample the yellow in the uniform here, make sure that's selected, and we can paint over some of this area like so. Try and be a bit more careful than I'm being. If you gently go over the edges there, change the blend mode from normal down to colour, and that should, as before, that should alleviate the problem. On the white, you've got to be a bit careful, because if you paint too much on the white, it's going to go from red to too stronger a yellow. So you want to be a little bit careful on there. But I'm going to show you another trick now to help the whites pop back. You do need, on these highlights, so you do need them to pick up. They wouldn't be pure white, but you do need them to pick up some of the colour. But we can do a little trick now which will help restore a bit of more cleaner whites to these areas. Okay, I've renamed that layer colour fringing. I'm going to select one of the background layers now, and what we're going to do is we're going to restore a little bit more highlight colour to the image, just to neutralise the highlights a little bit, and we can adjust that. We don't want it like pure white, but it's just going to add a little bit of sparkle back to the image if it's needed. So I'm going to do that, so I'm going to set the highlights. So I'm going to go to Select, Colour Range, and there is a preset on these drop-down boxes which says highlights. You can click on that, and you will get a in the preview, if you want to call it that, preview. You'll see what you've selected, and we want to again select the range, and again I would try and select a little bit more than maybe you need. You experiment with the fuzziness. I'm going to bring that down like so, and then click OK. And you'll see now we've got some highlights there selected on all our image. And what we want to do is add, there's a couple of ways we can do this, but this is the way I'm going to do it for now. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'll make sure that layer is above our hue saturation layer. Maybe even put it right to the top above our colour fringing. And I'm simply going to get a paint bucket with white selected, and I'm just going to fill those areas with white. Okay, you're just going to deselect that, and now we need to change the blend mode and add a layer mask. So let's add a layer mask first down here, and we're going to try. The idea here is it's to, as I said, just to add a bit of sparkle back to some of the highlights, maybe on the jacket. So I'm going to change my blend mode from normal to soft light. Sometimes you can try overlay or lighten or screen, but soft light I think is going to work best for this image. I'm going to drop the opacity down quite low, maybe to try about 20%. There's before, there's after, so that's probably maybe enough. I am going to paint away, going to get a paintbrush tool with black, paint on my mask, and paint away some of the adjustment on the shirt here. If you want to add a bit of a brightness to there, I would perhaps rather use something like a levels adjustment or a curves adjustment on there rather than this. But that gives you an idea. So if you just zoom out a little bit, there's before, there's after. It's subtle, but it just adds that little bit of contrast, bit of sparkle back to the uniform. Not always needed, but when you're changing colour, sometimes it's a good idea just to try it and see if it adds anything to the image. Could even perhaps bring that up a little bit, see what that looks like. There's before, there's after. It's too harsh. So somewhere around, I think, around 15 to 20% is enough. Okay, so this comes to the end of the video. I wanted to show you the good and bad points of the color replacement tool. There's no point me coming on here just showing you one tip and saying, you know, don't use the color replacement tool because I think it's not very good. I want to show you why it's a little bit restrictive in my opinion. And we've done that. I've showed you a way you can make it a little bit more versatile, but ultimately I've showed you this way of working, which I think you'll agree is a lot simpler and does the same job, and is also non-destructible. So there you have it. There's a little finishing touch there with the highlights. I have got another tip I really want to show you, which is a real powerful one, but we just simply run out of time. So maybe we'll leave that for another video. So thanks for watching. I hope you benefit from this and you've learnt a few pros and cons of the color replacement tool and a different way of doing the same job. And I'll catch you on the next video. Cheers for watching.